Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Grabe, and our guest today is Tash Doherty. She's a British, Irish, American writer and author, which totally explains why she now lives in Mexico City. But maybe we'll learn a little bit about that through her story. Tash is the creator of Miseducated, that's with two S's, M-I-S-S, Educated, a blog and podcast for business and pleasure. So there are some spicy topics in there, but a lot for everyone. She started writing her first novel. It's called These Perfectly Careless Things. She started writing it when she was 14, and she self-published it in September 2023. So we're not going to ask how long that was, but you're out of college. You've been in the working world, so it's been a while. As she describes it, it's that's where I got the word from, a spicy coming of age young adult novel set in London. Tash has also gone viral on TikTok for oversharing her birth control experience. Maybe, I don't know if that's her mistake. We'll find out. But before I tell you a little bit more, Tash, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm doing great. Excited to be here.
Yeah. How long have you lived in Mexico City?
I have been in Mexico City for almost 3 years. And actually, I was just reconnecting with an old colleague. And the last time I saw him in San Francisco was in April of 2022, which is coming right up. So it's been a minute. And I love living here. Mexico's amazing.
Well, good. I'm good. Tash, let me tell you a little bit more about her background. She graduated from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, where she studied business analytics and management. She was a Turner Social Impact Scholar. And in other lives, she worked in analytics at Postmates and Vox Media. And she still does corporate consulting to pay, as she calls them pesky bills. That's a more American way to say it than British, right?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
What would be a good Britishism for saying those pesky bills?
Probably the 9 to 5, keeping the lights on, that kind of thing, which we definitely need.
We all do. So there's a lot we can talk about here, Tosh. I want to talk about the book and the long story of how that all came to be available. But first off, as we always do, what's your favorite mistake?
Yeah, my favorite mistake was specifically when I was working at Postmates in San Francisco. It was about 2019, and I was fresh out of college. This was my first job, and I was not doing particularly well on the data and business team that I was on. I didn't really like the work that I was doing in business strategy. And so the head of product at the time came to me and said, "Hey, we'd like to put you on this other team." And I wanted to switch teams, but I did not want to switch to the specific team that they were trying to put me on, which was run by this guy called Samit, who I'm going to drag through the mud because he is involved later in the story.
No last names, though, so we'll keep that.
No last names, so we'll keep it somewhat. Anyway, so the head of product came to me and he said, "We're going to put you on this team. We think you're going to do great on this team." And I said, "Actually, I would really like to work with this other guy. Maybe I can work, do some business development, product, something like that." And he said, "Oh, can you not just trust us?" And I was like 23 at the time. So I was like, oh, maybe these people know, this guy knows me better than I know myself, or he knows better what I need. So I was like, okay. So I trusted this guy. And then within 3 months, Samit and my professional relationship had obviously fallen apart, and he subsequently fired me for just performing terribly. And I know this because 2 weeks later, they had a round of layoffs that I was completely not involved in because I had already been fired at that point. And so, yes, in the ripe young age of 23, I walked into this room with no windows on a Friday morning, had no idea what was happening.
Yeah.
Then Stephanie from HR and Samit were sitting there at the table, and they quickly and briefly told me that I would not be going up to eat the bowl of fruit and almond butter that was on my desk that morning. So, yes, that was my favorite mistake.
Oh, gosh. Well, and there's a lot to unpack. And here, I think there's still a part of the story to come of, well, why is that a favorite mistake? It sounds like just a bad experience to go through. But I mean, before we come to that, did things get off to a decent start with Samit, or were there some signs right from the get-go?
There were signs from the get-go that we were just not going to have good working styles together. Again, he's a smart person who does plenty of other things and is a competent professional. But one thing that had happened over the summer was that I had been in LA, and he had been very not happy with the fact that I was working remotely at all. And this, again, we had an office in LA. We were totally able to work remotely at this time, but this was pre-COVID. So he did not like the fact that I was still working remotely at all.
Mhm.
And he was just very attention to detail oriented, the kind of guy that would like make you put your vacation days, you know, in your PTO schedule, that many other people at the time in the company didn't care about at all. So yeah, and my attitude towards working is much more like fun and free, and choosing my own adventure, which is what some of the other people at the company had encouraged me to do, except when it came to delivering on, you know, the monthly reports and things that I was supposed to put together. And so I think I learned the hard way, basically, in that situation. Yeah.
So I'm curious, you know, that was your first job
Mhm.
out of Wharton. I mean, how did you choose Postmates? Did you want to work at a tech company? I'm sure you looked around at a lot of options. That must have felt like a good fit at first.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it was. I had actually wanted to start a company straight out of college, and I was really interested in YC, and so I moved to San Francisco. We did like YC Startup School, which is not YC itself, but the kind of precursor to that. But then I was running out of money and living in San Francisco, and so I decided to, you know, join the tech corporate ladder for a minute there. And I actually did pretty well on getting that job. Like that job, they were paying me like $100,000 plus stock options, which for a 23-year-old was a ridiculous amount of money to have for your first job. So I managed to convince them to hire me, but not to keep me for longer than 9 months. So I never actually reached that 1-year cliff of my stock options, which was quite annoying. But, you know, that's life.
Ouch. So Sumit didn't exactly have your back, firing you 2 weeks before a layoff. Like I've got a college buddy who was at a tech company, not in Silicon Valley, but he had a new job lined up, and he went to his boss, who he had a really good relationship with, and said, "Hey, I'm planning on," and the boss was like, "No, stop, cut that." Because so my buddy, I'm not trying to rub that in, but he got the enviable best of both worlds of having a new job and getting a layoff package.
Yes. Oh, God.
Sumit did the opposite of that to you, right?
Yeah, he definitely did. It's okay though. I was very angry at him for a long time, and I actually ended up having my own going away party where I like promptly told everyone that I was working with, because people like working with me, just not him, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he obviously wasn't invited to my going away party, but no, I've actually had other friends as well who got incredible severance packages from Meta and, you know, Netflix, and they just live off of those lovely severance packages for a while. I think I got like 2 weeks of severance with like my healthcare that was like expiring at the end of the month. And it was quite a lot and quite difficult to go through getting fired that early. And I don't really wish that on anyone, the experience of being fired. It's quite mean. Yeah.
I mean, and it doesn't sound like it was the biggest surprise. Like it sounds like you were clashing with Sumit. You said maybe in his judgment, your performance was poor, or do you think was that affecting your performance in your mood about things because that relationship wasn't good?
Well, definitely that. And also I think I was actually working with like the head of business development at the time as well. And those projects were a lot more pie in the sky. So we were, you know, launching in Postmates in stadiums, those kinds of things. And so that guy needed somebody who was thinking a lot bigger, and they still used all of my numbers for their reporting. But I think Sumit was just expecting me to be like his, you know, slightly below, and came at the business challenges that the team was facing with a lot more attention to detail, like rather than like strategic thinking, which is what I think they actually needed. So that's why I think he didn't like my specific working style. But going back to, you know, the reason why I think it was the most important, you know, my favorite mistake is because I really needed to learn to like trust my gut, you know, in that situation. Like I looked at the head of product and was like, okay, this man must know better than I do about my own working style, you know, my own the things that I want to work on, how I'm going to thrive at this company. And I suspended my own judgment and ignored my gut, which told me, don't work on Sumit's team, go do something else on a different team where you're actually valued and where the work strategies are a lot more aligned. So that was the tough learning for me there.
Yeah. But I mean, I could see, like I say, you know, your first job out of school, and I can understand why you might think, well, my gut's not perfectly calibrated yet.
Exactly.
I mean, right? I mean,
I'm very inexperienced, so
maybe better to learn that if it softens the blow, to learn that earlier than later. I mean, at least
it was still expensive though, like forfeiting stock options and a nice tech career. But I think ultimately I've actually now celebrated about 5 years since I had that job. And so, I just went up with an old coworker recently, actually, and it was incredible to realize that, like, since that happened, I switched to writing, becoming an author, having a totally different career, and actually, in the 5 years since that all happened, I've grown a lot, and I'm now doing something super different with my life that I'm a lot happier at, actually. So that's why I'm like, I was very resentful of me in the moment, obviously, because like you hate to be fired, and your ego hates to be crushed a little bit. But he did offer me that, which was a way out of the tech world. So I'm grateful for that.
Well, there's maybe in the category of things happen for a reason. If you had been moderately happy and sort of rose through the ranks, and you might still be there now and not have your book published, and it's hard to know what would the regrets have been if that didn't happen. We don't know, right?
Yeah, we can't live in an alternative universe, so I'm just going to take the universe that I have right now and keep calm and carry on.
Yeah, that's a very British expression. There we go. So how much of it was, coming out of that and thinking, well, what do you do next? Did you think, well, I could go look for a similar job? I imagine it might have been hard to trust another company, or how do you learn to trust?
Yeah, well, actually, Andreas, who was the head of business development, who I'd actually really enjoyed working with, specifically messaged me to tell me that he thought that I was in the wrong career path and that I shouldn't be doing data or analytics work. And I actually used that and got quite spiteful about that as well, and then ended up doing that for 2 more years. I ended up getting a job at Vox Media in New York. So I moved to New York and worked there for almost 2 years before I quit. And I think honestly, ultimately, I do like the challenge, the intellectual challenge of the data work. It's interesting to do coding and solve problems and those kinds of things. But ultimately, I feel called towards something that's much more creative and fun. Writing spicy stories on the internet, as you mentioned earlier in the introduction. So it swings and roundabouts, I would say.
Yeah. Before we talk about the book, and again, our guest is Tash Doherty. Her novel is called These Perfectly Careless Things. On your blog, among the more, we're a business podcast here, so I'm going to ask you about one of your business tech, commentary posts, and it turns out it was something that you I think relates to Postmates, and you wrote about that in the piece. It was titled "How Tech is Ruining the World." I was wondering if you could share some thoughts with us. And it's been a couple of years since you wrote that. What mistakes are we maybe making as a society or societies, or what mistakes? There's a mistake. What mistakes are the tech companies making?
Yeah, I'm really glad you're asking me about this piece specifically, because I have developed very strong opinions about this after working at Postmates. So the problem with Postmates and all these other, gig worker companies is that you're basically exacerbating inequality in a really, really destructive way throughout the whole world. And so I'll give you an example of this. At Postmates, we had about 1,000 people like me, the corporate people, the nice SF tech people who get the healthcare, who get the upgrade with learning certificate programs if we want to, those kinds of things, making 6 figures or more. So there are about 1,000 people doing that. Then we had a set of offices in Nashville. So these were customer service people who I don't even know if they got healthcare or not, but they were working, headsets on, talking to thousands of customers every day about all the issues that they were having with Postmates. And the Nashville offices were treated basically as a second tier, group of tech workers. And maybe there were 5,000 people working there. And then we had 1 million people who had ever done a delivery for Postmates. And we also used to do these competitions amongst the corporate employees of doing deliveries, which was quite fun. But when you're a delivery worker, you basically are getting paid $5 or something to take an hour out of your day to bike around San Francisco or drive around whichever town it's in. And so you could basically very easily see in this world of Postmates or any of these other gig companies how you're bifurcating or trifurcating the entire society into really, really, really very, very different levels of astronomically different levels of wealth. You've got 1 million people basically living maybe paycheck to paycheck on basically the poverty line. And then you've got the 1,000 or so corporate employees who are at the top who are benefiting from all of that. And it was very interesting because one of my tasks when I was at Postmates, one day, my boss literally came to me and said, hey, can you check the minimum wages in these 30 cities across America, Oklahoma City, San Antonio, these kinds of places, so that we can make sure we're not paying out the fleet any more than the actual minimum wage in any of these places. And it's just, So anyway, that's why I think in a lot of ways, yes, we have the convenience as, consumers of being able to order whatever we want on our phones. But we need to think about the way that tech companies, when they scaled, are actually changing the world. And in this case, it's just really exacerbating inequality in a way that I kind of felt pretty disgusted with by the time I was leaving. And also, I just feel strongly about it because when you live in San Francisco, everyone constantly talks about the benefits of tech and how much tech is saving the world and blah, blah, blah. And then you work at a company like Postmates or Uber or whatever, and you just think, actually, you're not saving the world. You're literally just like entrenching inequality forever and ever. Amen.
Yeah. So one thing you wrote about in the piece, beyond elaborating on the economic inequality and widening inequality that's part of that machine, you used an interesting phrase there of where a lot of people who are heads down doing some sort of work were incurious about the machine. You seemed to be very curious about it.
Yes.
Contemplative about it, right? I mean,
yes. I think that's really what it is. Actually, it comes down to is the kind of nonchalance or kind of lack of concern, I guess, as you're saying, which is that when you're a tech worker and you're sitting in your nice fancy office or you're eating your almond butter with your fruit, you're not thinking about, the actual massive real world consequences that this is having in the world. And I think even companies like Airbnb, it's like a kind of weird form of I think I call it like neo-colonialism or like neo-imperialism, where like in Mexico, sorry?
Neo-feudalism?
Yeah, it's like basically we're paying all these tech workers, or every tech bro in San Francisco is making a little bit of money any single time anyone around the whole world is making a transaction. So this could be, an Airbnb host, where the fees in Mexico City can be up to like 30% of all of the money that the host is supposed to be making. And so, basically it's imperialism, it's colonialism, and and that's why I don't really work in the tech industry as much as I used to anymore.
Yeah. So is there I was going to ask if you still maybe had that desire to maybe start a company someday. Would it like to try to affect change or demonstrate a different way as possible? Do you think, does that require entrepreneurs to try to be concerned like, well, we would like our people to make more instead of trying to cap them and want everybody to do better? Does it require policy corrections? If you had a magic wand?
Yeah, I think it definitely requires some policy corrections. But I would say at least products can still really improve the world. One area that I continue to work in is women's health. And there's tons of innovations that still need to happen in order to get women the access to care that they need. So I feel very strongly about helping women's health companies these days. And also in regard to my own desire to start a company, I actually basically do run a small media company, which is that I have my paid subscribers. I also run workshops. So I teach people how to write and journal around specific spicy topics, and that helps me to pay my bills. So you can still make things that do happen in the world, but it's more just and this is actually the core thing that we have to think about is, should this technology be invented, right? And speculative futures is a very, very interesting aspect and a very interesting strategy that I think. So you imagine a technology, if it was scaled, what are the potential consequences of its scaling, right? Because humans have the capacity to build so many things, but the question is really, should we be building them?
Right.
So that's what I think, that's what I feel very strongly about. And you can usually just do that by imagining the speculative future of the technology existing or not, which is why I think women's health product scaling is a beneficial thing, because people can then, people of more different tiers of the economy can have access to those products, like IVF or whatever it is. So
yeah. Well, I think of the exposure I've had to some of the Silicon Valley startup thinkers, whether it's the lean startup movement or related thoughts, they would always ask or still talk about the question of, tech entrepreneur might ask, well, first off, can I build this?
Right.
Quite often the technical challenge isn't really that great, so you say, well, yes. Then there's the question of, should I build this? But that's always been more related, I think. I don't mean to be unfair to any people that coined some of this language, but I hear more of the talk around, well, should we build it? Meaning, is there a business model? Is this economically viable? Is
Right.
this worth sinking time into? And now I'm sure some of those people think the way you're reminding me of what I hear from you is asking a little bit more broadly. Really, should we? Like, yeah, there's a business model, but should we?
Yeah. And I think the AI arms race right now is really about them building the technology so that they can have control over it and then decide what they want to do with it. You wouldn't want like the Russians or the Chinese to be building the exact same technology. So let's make sure we have 4 different companies in, Seattle, SF and New York or whatever, doing that exact same thing. And then they can have that control over the data and kind of go from there. So I can see from a geopolitical perspective how it's important for the US to be able to develop those technologies. But I still think we're not really thinking about, in the SF tech land, all tech is good tech, and that's just simply not true, I think.
Yeah. And how far does the tech get ahead of society's ability or lawmakers' abilities to figure out, okay, what do we or what could we do to prevent some of those, okay, what happens if this really scales, bad outcomes?
Yeah, exactly. And I think luckily I do have a couple of friends who are really in the heart of the AI world. A couple engineering friends who have dedicated their entire tech careers to trust and safety, helping people not experience like abusive content, that kind of stuff. So I do think within these organizations, there are good actors who are trying to do this. But it's also, unfortunately, this is why I think tech and diversity in tech is very important, because you can see a lot of the issues if you type in like young boy or whatever going to school on an AI photo app, it'll always come up with a white boy, right? Because that's all of the data set that they've generated is focused on white people, right? So I think those challenges like remain, and hiring more diverse tech talent will hopefully address some of those issues. Yes, and hopefully women and people of color continue to be promoted and and their voices sought out in these environments, so we can actually build tech that works for more people. Yeah,
and not have disproportionate outcomes for different groups.
Yeah,
I guess that's part of the question of, well, how does this play out if it scales? It's just not, well, how's that turn out for the tech bros?
Yeah, it's turning out pretty well for them so far.
Yeah.
Except when they get fired, which is becoming more increasingly common. So
yeah, well, and as we record this in early 2025, there's more discussion in media and public settings about the role of tech bros, or maybe labels they would cringe at even more, like the word oligarch is starting to get thrown around in a way that I think a couple of years ago, people more generally admired the successful tech people, and now people are kind of asking, okay, well, they're asking important questions, or saying, well, there's maybe some downsides that come with the elevation of some people, right?
An extreme income inequality, and exactly that. Yes, nothing like a good deep discussion into the most moral issues of our time.
It's a perfect transition to a teenage coming of age love story, originally written by 14-year-old Tash Doherty. Tell us the story of, how it came to be. It sounds like it got set on a shelf for a while. How much did you cringe when you picked this up at whatever age to read it again, to decide, okay, yeah, I want to publish this? Or I'm curious how much rewriting, or I'm curious just to hear some of that high level story, including, like that pause.
Yeah, totally. So I started, as I said, when I was 14, because my English teacher at the time, Miss Fryer, in my private all-girls school in London, had told me that one girl in my school had written and published her first novel in a single summer in high school. And I was like, oh, perfect. Like writing a book, that can't be that difficult. And so I sat down when I was 14 to do that. And then every summer I would go back to it and I would spend about a month or two. Like my family and family friends can attest to me just sitting away typing at my laptop whenever we were on like family vacation. But they were still nice to me after that somehow. So yeah, then I spent basically 7 summers working on this book. And then when I actually went to the Wharton School in my first year, I was a freshman and I thought, okay, I don't have time for the frivolous pursuit of writing teen romance fiction. Like, I'm going to make lots of money. I'm going to go to business school. I'm going to like get this tech job, everything like that. And so I did that. I put aside my writing for like another 7 years. And it was basically through, being unhappy and dissatisfied in my career and not really being sure what I wanted to do, that I rediscovered this love for this novel that I had started when I was so much younger. And I think I restarted writing it maybe in like 2021, like April of 2021 at that point. And I basically rewrote the whole thing from scratch. I think I kept a couple of things. Unfortunately, with novels, there's 2 different forms of like writing a novel. They call them planners and pantsters, or like, yeah, pantsters and planners. So basically, either you just write whatever you want by the seat of your pants, or you plan your actual novel, right? And like what you're going to do from like start to finish. So I was a pantster for a very long time, which is why I was able to write a book for 14 years or whatever and not actually finish it. And then I started plotting as opposed to try something different. Read a really good book called Save the Cat and highly recommend that book to anyone who wants to write anything. So yeah, then that was how the novel actually got done. And so I published it in September of 2023 and this is it. It's called These Perfectly Careless Things.
Yeah.
And yeah, achieved my childhood dream of becoming an author.
Yeah. That's great. And would you say, I mean, who do you think, or maybe is reading the book? Is it teenagers? Is it younger adults who are maybe reminiscing about teenage years and experiences, or both?
Yeah, I have a couple different target audiences. So number one is just your standard teenagers who want to know what life was like in 2010. People in my age group, so like women in their like late 20s, early 30s, who want to read a story about what their life was like in high school. And then I actually, in general, do really well with women over 50. It's an incredible demographic of people. Love my readers who are over 50, and they just love and want to experience like a teen romance story again. Maybe like explore it through fantasy and fun. And a lot of them also really like London. So anyone who's really into all things English, Anglophile, which is a lot of older American women. They've also really loved the book, including my therapist, Barbara, who said that she couldn't put it down and she loved reading it. So love you, Barbara. Thanks for being one of my readers.
Yeah, well, that's cool. I mean, I think, boy, when I was 14, for one, I didn't have any romance at that point, and I'm older. I didn't have a laptop. I barely had a computer at age 14. So that would be a different, longer peek back at time. But yeah, that period of even being the 2010s is very different than teens didn't have social media and other challenges and tech challenges. That back to the weight of the world topic of, is tech good or bad? I mean,
right. Well, we did actually have Facebook. So basically, if you want to write anything these days, you'll figure out that technology is changing so quickly. You have to very much put a stake in the sand as to what time frame you're writing about. Because right now, if I was going to write about teenagers today, I would have to include TikTok or Instagram or all these kinds of things. So 2010, we did have Facebook, but we did not have Instagram. So you could still get, the experience of posting pictures of your friends and like writing on their walls and stuff too. And actually, the characters have Blackberries.
There we go.
If you want to reminisce about having a Blackberry, you can also read the book for that reason too.
Yeah, but it was maybe a time when that technology didn't come with quite the same overwhelming social pressures. Maybe it was a cuter, simpler time that, I'm sure, online bullying was a thing, sadly, before Facebook or Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah. Well, the character reminisces in the book about earlier when she was in like 6th grade, she used to have a digital camera, and she talks about how grateful she is that none of those pictures ever made it on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, you attended the Wharton School.
Mhm.
I'm curious what if any lessons from business school you apply to writing, publishing, to your business. I mean, you talk about target audiences. It sounds like, oh, there's some marketing
Yeah,
lingo
definitely.
there.
I mean, so many things. I think the Wharton School is a very interesting place, very, very intense competitive school to go to. And I just have a lot of memories of working hard and playing hard, So we would have like a 24-hour space in the library or whatever that you could study in at all times. But then we'd also go out and party until 4 a.m. So I really learned a really strong, great work ethic from studying alongside my peers at Wharton. I definitely make less money than most of them right now, which is also fine. But I think the other major lessons that I learned was I really got lucky in my last year at business school because they had just started offering business analytics. So this is, SQL, R, Python, these coding languages focused on data analytics. And that actually was a very in-demand technical skill set that, Postmates and all these other places were hiring. So I actually started out at a higher starting salary than a lot of my banking or consulting friends in New York. So basically, I'm grateful, super grateful to Wharton for teaching me a lot of technical skills. And I still believe that, a lot of creatives need to have some kind of income so that you can just pay your bills and then pay them pesky bills, basically, and then use the rest of your time to have all your creative pursuits. Because, of course, I want my books and my writing and everything to make money, but it's a lot of pressure to put that straight on you, when you have your rent to pay and that kind of stuff. So I recommend people to get some freelance gigs, teach yourself to code or do some data analysis, those kinds of things like I've done. And then you'll have a lot more mental and financial and physical brain space to focus on your creative projects.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit up front. Tell us again, or tell us more about, the portfolio of different services that you offer to people.
Yeah. So I have my paid subscribers on my Substack. So these are mostly family friends, and then also some of the older women from my writing group who want to support my writing, which is great. And then I also host workshops. So I help people specifically explore different aspects of their personality and their love life through writing, which is pretty fun and very interesting. And then I sell my books. So I have, print on demand. And that is what's really cool about that is that I can sell books in, South Africa, Australia, Germany, a bunch of places all over the world, thanks to Ingram Spark and print on demand. So it was really cool. One of my friends in Australia just bought my book a couple of months ago. And so that's amazing because I can basically do that. It's distributed, right? It's printing all over the world. And those are the main income streams that I have for now. And we'll have to see. I think even, if I got to 100 or 200 paid subscribers on my Substack, that could really represent a much larger chunk of my income. Right now I'm at 30, 40 paid subscribers, which is still great. And my goal of eventually is to do a lot of public speaking. So it could be speaking at conferences or hosting workshops at conferences, South by Southwest, those kinds of things. So the goal is to just keep going for now. Probably write some more books as well in the meantime. And maybe have some success with that. Who knows?
Yeah. By the seat of your pants a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. That's nothing, no plan. Just writing as much as I can.
Keep busy and see what opportunities will come up. I've spent enough time in the UK where it makes me wonder by the seat of your pants. Is that an American expression? And would Brits say by the seat of your trousers?
Definitely by the
pants. Has it? No, sorry.
I don't think they say by the seat of your trousers in English, but it would be. But I think they would just say, willy-nilly or something like that instead. But just no plan, just showing up every single day and doing the work.
Yeah. So do you think that work for you, do you envision more novels, other types of books? You're doing, from what I saw on the blog, more of fun nonfiction writing about life and business. What do you think?
I have already written a second novel. I have one draft of that done. and I have other nonfiction books planned. And it's difficult to know what to do because I want my work to be like very readily available for people. But sometimes it's good to, sell an ebook, these kinds of things. So there's a lot of monetization opportunities actually. And the other thing that I was going to mention is I actually am an affiliate marketer for a bunch of different women's health products that I believe in. Which is really great because then you just get an email now and then that says, oh, you made $20 because somebody bought this product and you did nothing. And so hopefully the more articles that I can write, the bigger traffic that I have, a lot of that affiliate marketing can also continue to support me in my creative endeavors. So right now I'm just really enjoying writing articles, but I do hope to eventually publish my second novel, maybe later this year. And then, see what happens with ebooks, because I think there's a lot of nonfiction ebooks, and if you can do it well, you can really make a lot of money. But it's an interesting balance, writing because you enjoy writing a book or because you want to make money from it. No right answer there so far.
It's a business endeavor. It's also, even for nonfiction books, like books I've written, it's still kind of an artistic endeavor. You want to be proud of the ideas, the words, if you can come up with a clever phrase. There's that satisfaction, you hope, that resonates then from a business perspective. But I'm a big fan. You mentioned Ingram Spark. My last two books, I call it more independent publishing, because I bet you didn't do this all yourself, right? That's why I don't like the phrase self publishing.
Yeah.
Indie publisher, but Ingram Spark is great for that. But the one thing I wanted to ask you about being both author and publisher, how do you've got a draft, you're going through, you're refining it, you're trying to perfect it maybe. How do you decide when to call it done and to actually click publish? Like, that can be hard for authors.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I've actually written a whole article about this called How to Work with Beta Readers. So with my first novel, I went through at least 3 rounds of beta readers and their feedback. So I pick somebody in my target audience, they read my book, they give me feedback on it, and then I incorporate that feedback into the story. And once I did a couple rounds of beta readers, I thought my story was much improved. And then I was able to work with just a copy editor, like a proofreader style person at the end of the day. And she helped me get the book publication ready. And that was in May of 2023. So yes, but I think most important thing for any of these projects is to have a deadline and say when you want to get it done. Because otherwise you can, as I did for the first 14 years of being an author, spend 14 years writing the same project and never finish it. And now I think especially as I just turned 30, I'm really trying to take this more seriously and publish as many articles and words as possible, so that I can really call myself a writer and an author, and and then people can read my work, which is very important. So
because otherwise you could fiddle with it forever
and ever. That's why I came up with September 2 years ago, and I was like, that's going to be the year or the month, and then guess what? Very important. I'm very good at making promises to myself. I don't promise myself very much, but when I do sit down and make a promise, it's going to happen. So
Well, Tash, it's great to hear about your story. I'm glad The Favorite Mistake had, as it turns out, some positive outcomes. I'm guessing you're much happier with yourself as your boss than before. But I'm glad you could share that story with us, and we got to talk about some weighty topics, and throw out another, what's an example of something something you've written, give people a sense of something that's less businessy and something I'd be comfortable with, and something spicy that I wouldn't be comfortable with, maybe.
Well, I actually just wrote a piece called The 10 Things That I Wish I Knew When I Was in High School, which I stole from Austin Kleon, which he stole from Debbie Millman. So it's a whole series of people who are writing the same thing. But one of my dad's friends actually read that and thought that it was very good. And so, if it's appropriate enough for him, then I think you'll enjoy it, Mark. So thank you.
Okay. Well, that title wouldn't make me blush, or wonder, hey, this isn't written for me, but maybe,
Yeah.
But I hope people will go check out. I'll make sure there's a link to the website in the show notes, and link to the Substack. TashDoherty.com is your website, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. I didn't want to make a mistake on
You got
that.
it.
Got it right? Okay. So Tosh, thank you again for being a guest. A lot of thoughtful insights, and it's great to hear about the book and everything you're doing. So best wishes to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for having me. I had a fascinating conversation about AI, tech, and all that. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Sure.